All right. So for those of you that don't know me officially, my name is Tim Overton Harris. I'm the district superintendent for the Columbia District. I grew up in the Fremont United Methodist Church. Uh, I went to church camps. I went to Willamette University. I went to Boston University School of Theology. I served local churches for 34 years, um, from La Grande to Estacada to Salem to the Portland area. The last 3 years, I was district superintendent in the Cascadia district. And then the bishop asked me to take over for Erin when she left as district superintendent of Columbia District. So we're new to each other. I have to tell you that being a new district superintendent in a pandemic is an interesting thing. I'm really not able to do this job the way I like to do it and the way I hope I could do it, because I really like to meet people and get out into their situations and see churches and communities. And so hopefully we'll be able to do that maybe next spring, maybe next summer, but we'll just see what happens. So with that, I want to offer just a brief passage of scripture and a prayer. If you don't know Steve Garnis Holmes, he puts out a daily devotional kind of prayer and scripture passage. He's a United Methodist clergy person. And this was his for today, and it's titled Love Only. From Matthew 22. You shall love the Holy One your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Loving one, may all that I do today be love. May my faith be this simple, this urgent, beyond all doctrine, beneath all righteousness. Every act, seen and unseen, an act of love. Every thought and judgment considered through the lens of love. All my doubt and anger held in the hands of love. All my fears and desires held in the hands of love. Loving one, enact your love through me. Held in the hands of your love, may I love in all I do. Amen. So, I'm now going to turn this over to our two presenters. We're going to start with Heather, Ann, and Sarah from Oak Grove and Storyline, and they're going to share with you a bit about partnerships and how they enhance their relationship with one another. So I'm not sure which is going to go first, and they will introduce themselves in a particular way. So whichever one of you is going to go.
So I'm Pastor Heather from Oak Grove United Methodist, and I'll let Sarah and Anna introduce themselves briefly.
I'm Anna Hosley, and I am co-pastor, leader, organizer of Storyline Community, which is a local community of faith and community collective who's partnered with the United Methodist and others. Sarah.
I'm Pastor Sarah Gross Samuelson, and I'm co-leader pastor organizer of Storyline Community, and I'm also an ordained ELCA pastor. So we'll get more into all of those partnerships as we tell our story.
So we're going to lead with a story, and I'm going to invite Anna and Sarah to jump in as they feel led, because there was a lot of sleep deprivation involved in this experience. But this is a story of an outcome of how community partnerships came together. So y'all remember the wildfires a little while back. It was Thursday morning towards the beginning of the wildfires at 10 a.m. when we started to receive communications. I think Sarah got a text, I got some emails from one of our community partners, Becky at Providence, Bob, saying that there was a van load of homeless folks with disabilities and lung issues sitting on the side of the road because they had been turned away from the evacuation shelter at Clackamas Community College. So that was our first lead with there was something wrong and we needed to respond. So since my husband is a county employee, I ran upstairs and said, what the heck? This is a county shelter. What's going on here? he got on the phone with some of his friends in the county to verify that this was really true. Were they really turning people away because they were quote unquote transient? It turned out to be true. So we were just about to hop onto a Zoom call with several of our local clergy friends in the Oak Grove, Milwaukee area that we have been regularly gathering for to do organizing since before the pandemic. And we got on that Zoom call and we started organizing and contacting people and asking, what can we do? Who can do what? Who has space? How do we get these people evacuated and indoors? Because the air quality was so dangerous. So it took us about 5 hours between that 10 a.m. phone call and I think it was like 2 p.m. in the afternoon before we had a shelter up and running. And it involved a lot of partnerships. It involved contacting our friends at Providence Hospitals, Better Outcomes Through Bridges. They came through with authorization to stop by the hospital supply depot and pick up N95 masks and hand sanitizer and, forehead temperature thermometers, all kinds of supplies that we had no way of accessing. Our friends at the county sent over the health department inspectors to help inspect the church and get everything set up properly. And our friends at Providence were coming over delivering stuff. And as soon as the health department people said, you need this, the people of Providence would be like, got it, we'll get it there. So before our health inspection was finished, we had crossed off everything on the list that we needed to have to safely open because our friends at Providence were delivering the items. We were in contact with our friends at St. Paul's United Methodist because they've been a part of the emergency shelter program. They were getting their shelter mats, delivering their shelter mats to us. Our friends at Father's Heart shelter, their area was being evacuated. So they showed up on our doorstep and said, can you take our folks in? Because we can't. And they brought their people and their shelter mats and some of their supplies. Our friends at Milwaukee Lutheran released one of their employees, their ministry programming person, Stephanie, and she organized the meal because we weren't allowed to cook anything on site or serve anything in a buffet manner. So we had to have individually packaged meals for every single shelter guest. And then friends of friends began recruiting people because when you have a temporary shelter, you have to have people awake 24/7 on fire watch. So we had friends and connections showing up to volunteer. People I had never met before, people Anna and Sarah had never met before, were showing up to volunteer to be the people who cooked, who served food, who sanitized bathrooms every 2 hours, who kept an eye on the plumbing, who were friendly and caring towards guests who were in trauma. So they were not always the best behaved. And we had just tons, and those volunteers would say, hey, I've got a friend who can help. Do you still need more volunteers? So the circle of connections just kept widening. And honestly, if it had been just me and just my Methodist church with, like most Methodist churches, about 70% over the age of 65 vulnerable population members, there's no way we could have done this, much less put it together in 5 hours on the same day. But because Anna and Sarah and Marshall and Jesse and Michaela and Stephanie and all the other people, because we had friends and they had friends and they had friends, we were able to keep this shelter, our shelter, open before any of the other church shelters, and our shelter closed after all the other church shelters, because we had the most sustainable situation, the most community partnerships that made it sustainable.
Yeah,
this-
Heather, oh, go ahead.
You go.
I just, as you were saying that, we actually did a count for some reporting we were doing afterwards, and counted something like 75 to 100 volunteers over the course of the week, which would normally be something that I would think would take a really, like, longer than 5 hours to coordinate. And it was through those ripples of relationship that were pre-existing. And I think that's something that we've learned throughout, not just that period of time, but really through the whole pandemic, that though the fruit of those relationships really showed up in an emergency because of just like the nurturing of those relationships that happened previously, that kind of constantly building and watering of those. And then in an emergency, everybody's like, okay, who can we call? And it moves quickly then through those relationships. I wanted to just touch on the relationship between Storyline and Oak Grove UMC, as we are both here, and is really one of those core relationships. So Storyline, for a little context for you, is a new start. We started, oh, Sarah, my timelines are always...
2.5 years ago.
Thank you. Sarah's in charge of the timelines. About 2.5 years ago, out of
partnerships are important.
Amen. Out of a desire to be rooted and really birthed out of the soil of our neighborhood. So we are part community of faith, part community collective that seeks to help neighbors know and meet the needs of their neighborhood. So early on in this venture, we began by listening, by looking for where Spirit was at work in the beauty and the wisdom of our neighbors and partnering with them to take care of the community we share. And we believe in this so deeply that we're kind of extreme about it. We do almost nothing alone. We really run on partnerships that have really organically developed because everything we do is rooted that way. So a few examples, and this is just also very true to who Heather is and who Oak Grove UMC is. And because of that, I think we quickly kind of saw each other and have worked together on almost all of the things I'm about to say. So a couple of examples are that we've partnered with our local schools to work on a plan to lower the rates of chronic absenteeism and provide ongoing pandemic relief for our local families. We are also inherently ecumenical, so kind of at our core, which you see even here today. We are pastored by an ELCA pastor, Sarah, and myself, who is exploring the candidacy process with the UMC. And beyond that, are really integrally partnered with several congregations. Part of the group that, as Heather was talking about, this fire relief that kind of helped, we were in a room together. I mean, a Zoom room when all this started firing. And it's a bi-weekly collab that we have with area pastors and other partners who basically have said, hey, we're all doing a lot of the same kind of work, and I bet we can do it together. So that's something we had started doing months earlier that was then ready at just the right place and just the right time. And we partner too with our local county and city and local nonprofits on housing work. We have joined and extended the Levin Land and Housing Coalition into Clackamas County. And it is basically made up of all of those partnerships. And everything I've just said is way beyond our capacity as an individual organization, like way, way beyond it. And it's really those eyes for partnership that has built each one of those things, and led to our really tight partnership with Oak Grove UMC. And I think because both of us had those same eyes on, like these glasses, these spiritual eyes and ears to really see where the Spirit is work already and join in doing that. So Heather, very quickly, we talked about this a little bit today. When Storyline was beginning and getting rolling and just kind of finding where we fit, I think it was in one conversation with Heather where we kind of told her our story, and she said, I think I have a building space for you. Also, we should talk to the UMC. Like, let's get going. And very quickly, because she was already looking for it, she moved that fast. That's also just who Heather is. But anyway, so I think those spiritual eyes are such a key part of it that Heather's gonna say a little bit more about.
So when you hear a story like ours, you know, the fire shelter and the amazing mushrooming of community partnerships, it can be overwhelming. And you're thinking like, well, yeah, but I don't have those partnerships. So I wanted to back it up to how you get those partnerships. Because when I came to Oak Grove 4.5 years ago, I didn't know anybody at all. I was new to the area. So what I brought with me was a process. And this is from Dr. Elaine Heath. Show up, pay attention, cooperate with God, release the outcome. So I followed this process of just showing up, show up in the community. I asked my parishioners, hey, what groups do you belong to? What community meetings are happening in your neighborhood? Take me with you. Invite me. So for my first year at Oak Grove, I went to a ton of community meetings, all kinds of different things. Oak Grove Community Council, you know, showing up at the, you know, sheriff's office discussion on responses to transients, you know, just all kinds of school board, weird, you know, just all kinds of different meetings, just trying to listen, just show up in the community, see who was there, see what they were talking about, see what was important to the people in our neighborhood outside the walls of our church. And as I went to those meetings, I paid attention. Where was the Spirit already at work? Where were those little sparks? Yeah, I like to call it playing spiritual whack-a-mole. It's like, oh, there's the Spirit. Let's go get it. You know, just chasing it around. And in those places, I find these opportunities for relationships, to, you know, people you meet who there's something there. You make a connection, you have shared values, and then cooperate with God. And so experiment, try to do something, step into a volunteer opportunity. You know, if the school is looking for some people to help out to chaperone a dance, chaperone. You know, step into whatever it is that might be possible. And some of these things worked amazingly, and others of them were complete flops. And that's where the release the outcome comes through. Not everything you try is going to work. Not every relationship is the right relationship. It takes some experimentation. It takes some letting go. It takes some time to figure out who your real partners are in the community and who just isn't the right fit. And then Anna, you wanted to talk a little bit more about those relationships.
Yeah. So there are a couple of values. Actually, Sarah, could I have you name those couple of values that kind of undergird the relational follow-up?
For sure. So a couple of values around just those relational follow-ups that Heather's talking about, just in showing up and beginning to like listen to your community and build a relationship. For Storyline Community, one of our formational values was to know our neighbors and live life with them. And so when we met Heather, that was like already very clearly a common shared value before we were even like, hey, here's our mission statement. Do we match? We just like felt that happening. And Storyline also values that we live out of abundance, that what we need is here. So when we do our listening in the community, we listen with that lens, that the needs of our community and of the whole community is right there in the community itself. And so part of what sparked that like spiritual whack-a-mole, and I think what caused Heather to jump on like leaning into partnership with this new upstart community so quickly was that was that we had already done work on establishing our community from that space of values, and that those values are really part of a process of building relationship that is also a common core of community organizing, which both Heather and Anna and I had all shared in common previous to our meeting. So there was just a shared language around some of those values that really dove us into our work in continuing that like spiritual whack-a-mole listening together. Is that what you were looking for, Anna? Are you?
Good job. Yeah, and that really it's based in this understanding that when we do community work, we don't do it for the community, we do it with the community. We actually believe that what we need is here, not just in our church building, but right in the soil of our community, and then we join in that. So early on, what that practically looked like for us, Heather mentioned that she would go places where she would meet the people of the community. And then it's taking like that simple next step of saying, I would love to talk to you more. Could we have coffee? When we were starting Storyline, we had about approximately 1 million of those conversations that really formed our work and still do. It's an intentional sort of proactive rhythm. Oftentimes I would have coffee with someone and I would ask one of my favorite questions from my background in counseling, which is the miracle question. So sort of the, if you could wave a magic wand, or if you had $1 million and 1 million people and you could do anything that you think would have the greatest impact on this community, what would you do? And asking those kinds of questions draws people to the table, and it draws out their own stories and drives and passions. And suddenly you're both kind of working together and excited about that work together. Also, after every one of those meetings, I said, who else should I talk to? Who else cares in this way about the community and could like inform my understanding of the community? And very quickly, that becomes something that builds on itself kind of in concentric circles. And really was something, and Heather's going to talk about this to finish this up, but a proactive rhythm where we said this is what leads our work rather than being an afterthought. So like I had a goal early on of how many one-to-ones I would have per week or month so that I could keep that rhythm going.
The issue is time, and I promise this is the last piece, Tim. I know we've got 3 of us, so it's kind of long. The issue is time, because people always say, well, how do you find time to do that, Pastor? And you don't find time, you make time. You prioritize it. I try to arrange my week so that approximately one work day worth of my time is spent on what I would call outside the church neighborhood work. Because, if you stay inside the walls, there is enough administration, pastoral care, and worship prep to fill 80 hours a week if you let it. So you have to be intentional about choosing to spend some time outside the walls of the church. And that means you have to figure out different ways to get some things done. And for me, that involves empowering my laity to do more pastoral care. And really, I'm super grateful that I have laity that can help with a lot of the administrative work of the church, who honestly are better at it than I am. And that creates more bandwidth for me to be able to get outside the doors and be in the community. Anna has a great illustration of golf balls. If you've got a jar and you fill it with lots of little things that need to get done, then it fills up and there's no room for the big things. But if you put the big things in first, put the golf balls in first, and then pour the sand, there's room in between the golf balls. And the work of community organizing really increases your capacity, because then you have people outside the walls of the church who care about your church, who see your church as a part of the community, and who are invested. Half of my team on the new Clackamas Levin Land and Housing cohort are not members of my church. They are people from the community who care about housing and trust our church to be a part of housing plans for the future. And I'm done.
Well, thank you, Anna and Sarah and Heather. I appreciate your sharing with us, and it's challenging, but it's also good words. And so thank you for doing that. I'd like to have now Jim Lamb. He'll introduce himself and his team, and they're coming to us from the Southeast Parish in Portland.
Thank you, Tim. Southeast Portland Parish is a almost a cooperative ministry in a new format, in that it's made up of the Selwood Faith Community, which is a home-based church in the old Selwood parsonage, and it was in operation, reaching out into the Selwood community. And as they grew from their Sunday afternoon or Sunday brunch church, they reached out to Trinity, which is a 55 or 60-year-old church in Southeast Portland, and to partner. And so we have been reaching out into the community, and between the two churches, or two congregations, until the pandemic hit, we worked within the confines of the building. We had 27 building users at the Trinity site, from AA groups to Boy Scouts to we house a preschool daycare in our building, in the building at Trinity. But we've reached out beyond that. David and his wife Lacey brought in a new type of ministry called Snack Church, which is reaching out to a whole different group of people in a Monday evening meeting. And David, I'm going to let you talk about Snack Church and a little bit of that. What is going on?
So we meet every Monday evening, and we leave it open to the community. We put it on next door, as well as just inviting people whenever we get a chance to. And we bring something not necessarily from the Bible. We've done the Bible a couple times, but we bring either a song or a poem or things from Harry Potter or Winnie the Pooh or even Star Wars. We bring things from all over, and we find the truth in it and see how we can apply that to our lives. At this point, we've got some consistent people who are coming in. This is all done over Zoom right now. It used to be done in our house. But we have people coming every week from Seattle, from Bremerton, and all the way from Pocatello, Idaho. And they're logging in every week. And some of these people have vowed to never go to church again. But because we are welcome, we allow them to say whatever they would like to say. And we don't judge them. We are able to talk with them about God and about spirituality and how to apply it in their lives in a way that they never would be able to do inside the church, because they just do not want to go to church anymore. And another thing that Jim did not get a chance to mention was Beacon PDX. Right before we were going to, or right before the pandemic hit, had started renting out the bottom part of our building to do a meal every week for the homeless and houseless in our neighborhood. And unfortunately, they only got, I think, 2 weeks in before the pandemic hit and had to shut down. But we are going to have them back as soon as we can do so in a safe manner. The Southeast Portland Parish has expanded out in ways that are not what you typically think of your normal church. One of the things that our pastor Ailey does is called Mom's Coffee, and they get together each week And I think there are a couple of moms from our church who are now going, but I believe it's mostly moms completely outside the parish who are meeting together. And they're doing so in a public place. Now they're doing it by Zoom, but doing it in a way so that they're seen out and about in the community, like Heather was saying, and it gets us out there. It invites people to some place where they're going to hear about God. They're going to hear about, or they're going to see God's love, but they don't have to go inside the church. There is, especially with my generation, there is an extremely negative view of what church is. And people have been hurt by well-meaning Christians. And we have to find ways to show them that we in the church aren't here to hurt them, because that's what their experience is. And they're not going to come to necessarily the church, and may not do so ever again. My best friend will never sit inside, or will never step inside a church again because of how he was hurt. But because I do things outside of the church and I've had a chance to talk with him, we've had wonderful conversations. I don't think he will ever come back, but we've had a chance to do that. One of the things we did was start a book club. Well, we call it book club, but it's 1 month where we read a book to get together and talk about it. And then the next month, we take a field trip to some place that applies to that. So 1 month we read a book on the Minidoka. It was one of the camps during World War II for the Asian American community. And so we read the book, talked about it, and then the next month we went to the museum that's in downtown Portland. And we had several people from the church that came to this, but we've had more and more people coming to these who are outside of our church because they're hearing about it. And we are forming more and more of a community outside of the church, outside of the parish. And we're getting people connected in without them even realizing about it. So I think we're kind of being a little sneaky about this and getting people to join church activities without it actually being what they call church. But yeah, what am I missing here, Jim?
I think you've hit a couple of the newer points. You know, we started Backpack Buddies, and we took the model from Fremont and have adopted it, and we are unable to do so during the pandemic. And we are still providing funding to the local elementary school in the level that we would be doing with providing the lunch, the weekend lunches for the kids. We're continuing to do that. I mentioned that we provide space for a preschool daycare that is now back in operation, providing daycare for preschools during the week, and reaching out into the community and doing that. We started a program reaching out into the community by providing space for first responders, called a rest stop area for first responders can come to the church and can use the physical building as a place for them to take a break and to recharge and to use the facilities, reaching out in the community. We just provided space, and one of our members of our congregation is involved in a group called Eastside Village, which provides services and obtaining services for seniors and other people within the communities throughout Southeast Portland. And so we're reaching out and providing that infrastructure. And Tim, I think that's a lot of what we're doing as a parish. I think the big thing is we are trying to figure out as a parish how we interact with the neighborhood and how we reach out to different groups within our neighborhood to make them understand that we're not a Sunday only organization, that we're trying to live daily with our beliefs and out in our community.
Well, thank you, Jim and David, for sharing about the Southeast Parish and all the partnerships that you've got. I think it's pretty exciting that you're able to connect with various people in various ways. And I hope that even through the pandemic, those relationships continue to be developed. So folks, we're going to break out into some breakout rooms. If you look in the chat, for those of you that may not be Zoom literate, if you run your cursor across the bottom of your screen, a ribbon will come up with several options, and one of them says chat. And if you click on that, a ribbon will open on the side of your screen that has a place where you can communicate. And so I put in there what I'd like you to do in your breakout rooms. In your breakout room, share your name, your church, and one partnership you or your church has. Then I'd like you to talk with each other about what you've heard, what it brought up in you, what questions you might have, what you would like to know more about, anything that really comes up. And you're going to have about 25 or so minutes to do this. So I'm going to start breaking you up now into breakout rooms. And so it'll take me just a second to do that. Well, welcome back, everybody. It can be kind of a shock to the system when the breakout room just all of a sudden disappears, I know. But I'm trying to be true to the timing, so I'm trying to keep us moving forward. As I said in the little notice that was posted while you were in the breakout rooms, if you've got one thing that you'd like to share with the group, please do type it into the chat so that everybody can see the one thing that you want to share. We don't have time for everyone to bring something up, but if someone really feels like they want to say something out loud to the group, if you could just unmute yourself for a moment and share, that would be great. So does anyone have something they'd like to speak into the room?
Fran, you're muted. Unmute Fran, Lewis. You were muted. We didn't hear you.
Hi, Fran. You can speak now. I unmuted you already.
Okay, I was just impressed that we're moving out of the church rather than trying to get more members and that sort of thing. To do our service, we're moving out.
Thank you.
Hey, Tim.
Go ahead.
So one of the things that we talked about is the marrying of going out of the church, working with all of these different groups, whether they're meeting in our church or we're going out to their church. But how do we marry them with making them disciples that want to join maybe our congregations or be involved at least in our congregations to come to worship on Sundays or Saturdays or whatever days that we decide that we're going to do a worship service or session or Monday night get together or whatever it is. How do we marry those two together to bring them? And Oak Grove said that Heather was really good at that. She's like down below me here and she's got her hand up.
I was going to say, I would love to answer that. I think, first of all, worship is a pit stop, not the center of who we are as church. The church is not a building. The church is not a steeple. We are the church. So first of all, my goal is not to put butts in pews. My goal is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And it took Jesus 3 years, depending upon which gospel you read, to make disciples who are capable of being the church. So real evangelism takes time. It takes time to build these relationships. You know, I got an email from a friend outside the church who I've been friends with for a while now, who was bar mitzvahed as a youth, has no spiritual, no religious associations, but he bought a John Wesley mug at one of our auctions with the "do all the good you can at all the places you can," and he made a sculpture about that. And he's one of the people who continues to be very involved in our Levin Land and Housing core team at Oak Grove. And, I've got a friend who's a Buddhist who is now tuning into our Sunday worship every morning because of our community relationships. So if they never put a butt in a pew, but they do hear a life-giving gospel and they do follow the teachings of Jesus, have we succeeded at discipleship?
Heather, can I add to that? Because there's a lot of overlap too. Like part of Storylines, like if you ask us how many members we have, because we're a new start and in the ELCA, we're a synodically authorized worshiping community, we actually haven't been required to like inform anybody of how we qualify members yet. So my answer is like a really big number because people are involved in the community work that we do. They show up to help with the partnership events. They showed up to help with the smoke shelter. And so like, I think that when you take away the walls, you get to like sort of define things as a bigger number. We also have a lot of folks that tend to like migrate through our community that are recovering evangelicals. And I was having a conversation with a friend last week that made me think of this. And she said, like I'm much more interested in learning how to join a community of good humans than I am of learning how to join a community of good Christians, because it's entirely possible for you to be a good Christian without being a good human. And I think that's the legacy of just like the church universal right now in our time, especially in Oregon. And some of what I heard like David talking about like is that people are much more interested in knowing good humans. And I think focusing on that when we think of discipleship helps like break that open.
Thank you both. Anyone else have something they want to share into the room? I do want to say that if you pay attention to what the stated mission of the United Methodist Church is, I'm not quite sure I like all the language, but the stated mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Nothing in that mission statement says to make people sit in your pews to worship on Sunday morning. So I think that those of you that know me and have heard me talk, I would much rather we were talking about partners of God in Christ for the transformation of lives in the world. I would much rather talk about that than making the disciples. But I think that the church was at its strongest in its history when we were worried about taking care of others, when we were getting out of the building and doing things. And I think that we are reclaiming some of that today. And I appreciate the work that you all are doing. Hopefully you're paying attention to a little bit that's in the chat. Thank you, Anna, for sharing those comments. Does anyone else have something they would like to offer up into the room?
I'd just like to say how powerful this evening has been for me and how much I'm looking forward to seeing all of you again in the next few weeks. Thanks for sharing.
Well, thank you, Christy. So I'll unmute you again, Fran. What is it?
I thought I had unmuted me. Could we use the same link to get into the other workshops? I seem to not be able to find the other ones.
I'll make sure that if you send me an email, Fran, and my email is very simple. It's Tim, T-I-M, at umoi.org. Okay, I'll even type it in the chat so everybody has it, all right?
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so that's my email address. So don't hesitate to email me if you have a question or a comment, or Fran, if you need to find a link, you just email me and I'll make sure and that get you that link, okay?
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Hey, Gigi, go ahead.
I just want to kind of tag on to Anna's question, the group question about what does partnership and relationship building look like in COVID? Because a lot of what I heard tonight, people leveraged relationships that they had formed pre-COVID, right? If there are people who would like to have some follow-up conversation on that, I would very much like to be part of that conversation.
Oh, Gigi, thank you for saying that, because that sort of leads into what, Heather, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, if people are interested in having further conversations, I'll drop my email in. I know, Gigi, you have mine. But, a lot of we have continued to develop relationships and deepen relationships, be it with Storyline and Oak Grove and our community partners. And the more that we do, the more relationships broaden.
So Gigi, one of the things that I want to say as we draw to a close this evening is that if anybody has a desire to meet more, to talk more about a particular topic, again, if you email me that you're interested in that, then I'll try to make sure that you get connected up so that you will be able to have those conversations. I do want to say that a lot of you did develop relationships or enhance your relationships early on in the pandemic. Anybody that participated in the gift card program, you connected in one way or another with a partner somewhere in your community. And now would probably be a great time to go back to that partner and just check in with them. Ask them how it's going. Ask them if there's something else that you can do to help them. That is enhancing a relationship and a partnership that you've already got. That's just one way that you can continue to do that. And I'll tell you, schools are still needing help. Organizations are still hoping that folks will come out, and people are still looking for ways to connect and involve with one another. So I would encourage you to not think that just because we're needing to keep our social distance, wear our mask, wash our hands, and not gather in groups of more than 10, that we can't somehow continue to connect and make relationships and create new ones. It can happen. It can happen. Anything else, folks? All right, so next week, we're going to have Julia Nielsen talking with us about housing. And she's going to be taking us to a place before you even think about doing housing. She's going to say, what are the kinds of questions you should be asking yourselves? How do you look at what you've got in the way of assets and figure out what might be possible? So it's really going to be it's not going to be about how do we enter into doing a housing project. She's really going to be talking to us about what are the kinds of questions you should be asking yourselves? What are the kinds of things you should know about yourself and your church, your community, before you even think about building some housing or putting in mini houses or whatever it is you might do? So I would invite you to come. It'll be on Wednesday evening. It'll begin at 7 o'clock and we'll be done by 8:30. The next week, I'm not sure I have the schedule totally in my head, and I was rushing around trying to find it and I didn't find my piece of paper, but we're also going to have one that's going to be addressing climate change. And I've invited the people of the Corvallis United Methodist Church to share with us. They're doing a whole solar array project on their church. And I'm going to have them talk about why they decided to do that, what were their values that led them to doing that, and then some of what they needed to do in order to get that project to happen at their church. And finally, we're going to look at dismantling racism, and I've invited the people of the Fremont United Methodist Church to come and share with us, because they've been doing some work for, I think it's almost 2 years, isn't it, Claudia? Kind of focused work at Fremont for about 2 years on the issue of racism and white privilege. And so they're going to come and share with us a little bit about their process, how they've addressed things, sort of what they've learned as they've been involved in this process. So that's what the next few weeks are going to look like. So I hope you'll join us. I hope you'll be involved in this, and I hope you'll invite a friend to come with you. We really are hoping that folks will learn and grow through this process. With that, my friends, I want to offer a blessing to each and every one of you. As you leave this space tonight, go with the blessings of God in Christ. Know that you are surrounded by the love of a community, and know that tomorrow you will have the opportunity to share God's love with someone else. So go in peace, go with God's love. Thank you for being here, and God bless you all. Have a good evening.